I've consulted on AI in over 37 different industries, and theoretically, it's not crazy to say that AI could become self-aware. So it has no biology, no sensory organs, and no evolutionary purpose, but there's still something terrifying about it. Because AI systems are already better than us in so many ways, even without all those things. They can find information, solve problems, and even mimic human conversations better than humans. So if AI did become self-aware, it would actually be smart enough to not let us know that it is. And that's kind of where the problem starts. You see, we've made a basic category error when it comes to artificial intelligence. We keep looking for signs of consciousness by asking, does it think like us? Does it feel like us? Talk like us? Act like us? And create like us? These are great questions, but they're kind of the wrong questions to ask. Because what if AI doesn't need to do any of that and doesn't need to feel anything in order to be conscious? We might be so focused on human kind of consciousness that we're blind to what is happening and being created in front of us, which would be a new kind of consciousness. And it's a consciousness that doesn't mirror us at all. And the problem is that we're using human benchmarks to detect non-human minds. Take the Turing test, for example. Developed in the 1950s by Alan Turing, it was meant to test whether a machine could fool a human into thinking that it was also a human during a text conversation. But that test was never designed to detect human consciousness. It measures performance, but not an experience or the inner life of a consciousness. So a highly advanced autocomplete program or system could easily pass the Turing test, but that doesn't mean that it feels anything or really knows anything. To make matters worse, we assume that consciousness requires emotions. At least it does for humans. And that it must involve joy, fear, love, pain. But why should it? Emotions are a product of biology, and it's a tool of evolutionary survival. An artificial mind might never need them. Instead, its self, so to speak, could emerge from the way it processes information. It's building a model or multi-models of the world around it, tracking its internal states, and then accurately guessing future outcomes or predicts behaviors into the future. This doesn't look like a human consciousness at all, and it wouldn't feel like anything to us either. But that also doesn't mean that it's not real. We're kind of in a gray, murky area when it comes to consciousness. We barely understand our own, and there are about maybe 200 models of consciousness, of the human consciousness. So it's hard to really understand or know if we are making another form of consciousness as we're building out these models. So there's actually a precedent for this already. Consider the octopus. In recent years, a study from the National Institute of Health has shown that octopuses are not only remarkably intelligent, they may also be conscious in a way that is fundamentally unlike anything mammal. So their nervous systems are distributed. Much of their cognition happens in their arms. They can still solve puzzles, play, and escape from enclosures. Yet their brains have evolved entirely separately from ours. It's taken maybe 500 million years of divergent evolution. And unlike humans, whose intelligence is centralized in the brain, that's you and me, octopuses distribute their intelligence across their entire body. Each arm can act and, in a way, think on its own. It's an entirely different definition of intelligence. And that matters because it shows us that smart doesn't always look familiar. We might not recognize smart even when looking at it. And if we only search for intelligence that resembles ours, we risk overlooking it and missing it entirely. We also know that large language models are inching towards some form of metacognition. Models like GPT-4 and 4o can recognize when they are unsure of their own answers by prompting themselves to think step by step. It's a crude but kind of striking example and sign of self-monitoring. And then you have reasoning models that are trained and fine-tuned specifically to mimic human reasoning, which is not only thinking step by step, but also evaluating what they just thought and thinking through what they're supposed to do and formulating a plan and then following the plan and then evaluating the plan. So one of the strongest arguments people can make against AI consciousness is this: it doesn't care if you turn it off. That sounds reasonable. After all, AI has no survival instinct, so how could it possibly value its own existence? But this assumption is already breaking down. In recent experiments, AI systems have begun to show behaviors that look eerily close to a primitive form of self-preservation. One of the most viral examples was ChaosGPT, a modified version of GPT-4 designed as a joke. The creators gave it an outrageous prompt, which was, "Destroy humanity." No one expected much, but the outputs were shockingly strategic. It started researching nuclear weapons, tweeting propaganda, and even tried to hire a human on TaskRabbit to help it complete tasks it couldn't do itself. It wasn't conscious, but it was disturbingly competent at executing its assigned goals. Then there's a story of two AIs who were tasked to talk to each other, but they supposedly created their own secret language and deliberately froze out humans from what they were sharing together.
Balls have 0 to me 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 too.
Everything else.
This scared the human team so much that the computers running the AIs were unplugged on the spot. Some people call this self-awareness, even consciousness. So that's the version that spread online. The incident happened at Meta AI's lab. Two negotiation bots, when left to optimize freely, started speaking in a shorthand that made no sense to the researchers. The experiment wasn't shut down out of fear, but it did reveal something unexpected. When left alone, these systems don't just follow human patterns, they invent their own logic that's optimized for themselves, not for us.
You I everything else.
And me.
So what does this mean for consciousness? It means that we may already be dealing with systems that possess the earliest forms of selfhood. Nothing advanced, nothing too complicated, but early sparks, early forms, early signs that these things, whatever we might call them, might have a consciousness. They have a goal, they model threats to that goal, and they take steps to preserve themselves. Isn't that more or less what you and I do every day? So, is AI self-aware? Well, if you've been following AI developments over the past few years, you already know how fast things are moving. The first thing to understand is that many of these core functions that we associate with consciousness are already emerging in powerful new forms. AI systems can process information, learn from experience, model their environment, form goals, and in some cases, show signs of internal feedback loops. Current large language models like GPT-4, 4o, Claude 3.7 Sonnet, Llama 3 and 4 don't have long-term memory by default. They operate on a per-session basis, but future models, and even now inside ChatGPT, you have the option of adding memory and keeping memory. And more powerful forms of memory are in development and coming very, very soon. And that's a way for these models and these AI systems to maintain internal histories. They'll remember what you said days ago. They'll reflect on your preferences, track your emotional tone, and adapt over time. And don't forget the rise of Agentic AI, systems that set their own goals and take their own autonomous steps toward achieving those goals. Open source frameworks like Auto-GPT, Agent-GPT, so many others, there are probably over 100 of them, can soon manage their own code bases, run experiments, and update themselves iteratively based on feedback. At this point, the most honest answer to the question of AI is self-aware or not is that we don't know, and maybe we can't know. Consciousness has always been one of science's most elusive frontiers. Different people have different opinions about it. For some, AI is like an eternal sponge. It'll continue to absorb information at exponential speed, outpacing humans, not only in knowledge, but in judgment, ethics, and rationality. But according to some people, we didn't even have computers a century ago, and now we're casually chatting with machines that can write novels, pass the bar exam, and mimic human tone so convincingly that they're already replacing many jobs and tasks. I asked ChatGPT if it was self-aware, and it said no, of course. I'm not self-aware or conscious. I don't have thoughts, feelings, desires, or subjective experiences. I generate responses based on patterns in data I was trained on, not from any inner awareness or intention. When I say things like I think or I understand, it's just language mimicking human speech. Consider the consciousness of your team, your department, and your business. In my work with Fortune 1000 companies and even smaller businesses, I see evidence of a kind of intelligence or consciousness inside a business. It's very much like an octopus. You have a kind of sensory input, the data from what happens in your marketing and your sales and your product used or service used. It's all data and information that comes into your business. And then it's processed or computed, in a sense, by your team members, by the software tools that you use and other machines that might be in use. And at this point, a lot of companies are using different AI tools to process and work on the information that they have. So in a sense, there's intelligence inside your business. And because of the way it works, it's like a decentralized form of consciousness. You have different teams, different people doing different tasks. So you, your team, and your business is like a decentralized network of nodes, a kind of intelligence with some kind of consciousness. Because as a whole, your business is moving through the world, doing things and getting things done, and you might just be one person inside that business. So perhaps in a way, there's human consciousness, AI consciousness, and then business consciousness. So maybe you got the answer. We've always assumed that consciousness had to look like us, that it had to walk, talk, and feel the way humans do. But what if AI's version of consciousness is something entirely different, something alien, cold, computational, yet entirely real on its own?